All right, Ryan, we got some breaking news. I thought we were going to get out of here real quick in 20 minutes, but we got to get to this right now. I think it's absolutely massive. Jonathan Jones from CBS reports that the Falcons have requested permission to interview Bills interim offensive coordinator Joe Brady for their vacant head coaching job. Brady previously interviewed for the job in 2021. I mean, we were sitting here talking about if he'd get some offensive coordinator love, but man, 7-1, the way this Bills offense has produced, how he's been thrown in the deep end of the fire. Now the Falcons are putting him up against Bill Belichick. I mean, what do you think about this?
Well, it felt like Belichick to the Falcons was close to a done deal, but I guess blowing a 2-interview lead with Belichick could certainly happen in Atlanta. That's something that they're very good at doing when it comes to Belichick and his former team. So I guess scouring and looking at some other options is never a bad idea. Joe Brady, I like a lot of what he's done here, Matt. I don't know if he's ready to make that jump from, interim offensive coordinator to a head coach in the NFL, but he's clearly impressed some people. And I think it's always smart for teams to do their due diligence, even if it's not for now, Matt. Think about Bill Belichick. How old is he?
72. He'll be 72 when the season starts next season.
Even if they were to agree to terms with Belichick, I'm thinking that is a short-term deal. And just like when you meet with players during the draft process, I think teams want to interview coaches that they think are up and coming and could potentially be head coaches. So maybe it's just due diligence on their part saying, okay, after Belichick retires, we can always go back to this interview that we had with Joe Brady, and maybe he's the heir apparent. Maybe he's the guy that we target after this. I'd be surprised to see him get a head coaching job, but at the same time, it's encouraging to see him get some recognition for the good that he's done here in Buffalo.
Yeah, I don't think in the end he's going to get hired as a head coach somewhere, but crazier things have happened. And listen, the thing that stands out about Brady, I was talking about this on a radio show today, about his job that he's done since taking over, is the connection that he makes with the players. Look at what's happening in Las Vegas right now. Antonio Pierce hired as the interim head coach. Max Crosby coming out and saying, I'm going to request a trade if this guy doesn't get the job, with all these big-time names lingering out there. I mean, Jim Harbaugh out there, somebody that, you'd think that Mark Davis would want to take a run at. In the end, they just go back to what was working late in the season for them, somebody that connected with their players. And there's something to be said for a young coach, a guy that connects with players and also is known around the league for having a brilliant mind. Some of the interesting comments here in the chat here is about, okay, another potential distraction for the Bills going into a playoff game. You have Joe Brady, who took this thing over 8 weeks ago, going into a divisional matchup against Steve Spagnuolo. I mean, can't think of too many tougher opposing coordinators, and he's taken some time out to interview, and this came up with Dable before. It's definitely could potentially be a distraction. I don't think that my sense that I got from Joe Brady the other day is that he's all locked in on this thing, and we didn't know about this, obviously, but, he's deep in the lab, and he was actually even post-practice. It was so loose, like him, Josh Allen, Shane Buechele, Kyle Allen, the quarterbacks were doing some stuff with snowballs with Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer and deep end of the. So, I mean, it was playful, it was having some fun after practice, and he's one of the guys in a lot of ways. And I think that it reminds me of Brian Dable in that way because of how close of a relationship he had with not only Josh, but other players on the offense.
Yeah, and I'm going to say take it with a grain of salt in terms of the distraction part, because as mentioned in the comment here, Ben Johnson, who's also preparing for a big game in Detroit this upcoming weekend, he's took some interviews. He had 2 interviews yesterday, 2 interviews today. Hot candidate, legitimate head coaching candidate. I don't think it's going to be much of a distraction because they're buttoned up. They're focused on their respective opponents. But going back to Atlanta for one more thing, you look at that roster. Yes, they're back at square one when it comes to quarterback. I don't think Ritter is the answer. They're probably, I don't know if they're going to be able to do anything there, but they do have a lot of young talent where they probably sat there and said, boy, look at what Joe Brady has done already for Dalton Kincaid. And we have Kyle Pitts on this team who he's been good, but he hasn't come close, I think, to the expectations that a lot of people had when he was drafted as high as he was. I mean, there was talk about this guy being the next big thing at tight end, and it just hasn't happened yet. They have a young wide receiver in Drake London who Hasn't had a lot to show so far in his career. And obviously, really talented running back there, too, who had a very disappointing rookie season, all things considered. A lot of it falls on the coaching staff there. So it never hurts to pick the brains of these offensive minds. Like, how would you use Bijan Robinson? How would you use Drake London? How would you use these guys? Because even if they're not the head coach, at least it's in the back of your mind. Well, here's what Joe Brady said, and if they interview Ben Johnson or these other offensive-minded coaches, you at least have that in mind. So that way, when you do pick an offensive coordinator, you're looking for someone that aligns with that thought process. So can't blame Atlanta for doing their due diligence. I wouldn't expect Joe Brady to be the front runner or even, second or third for those leading candidates for that job, but good for him for getting an interview.
Yeah, indeed. Good for him for getting the interview. And I think that, the Bills, there's a decision looming at the end of the season. Like, what are they going to do with Joe Brady? Are they going to, depending on how this thing ends, up to this point, it's been nothing but really great, like pivoting from Ken Dorsey to Joe Brady. There's a decision to be made, though. Like, okay, what are they going to do long term? And I want to bring up something that he said, Brady, when we talked to him yesterday. So he was asked about his reaction to the Josh Allen touchdown run. And he goes, he joked, I think you guys probably saw it because it was in the booth cam on CBS. Yeah, one, it was a great play call. That our guys are gloved right now, which meant guys were guarded up down the field, and Josh is having to run. He's making a joke, of course. But that's who Josh is. He's a human eraser. He makes bad play calls work. I love in that situation, there's going to come a time, whether it's this week or the next however many years here, that all the times I'm telling him, hey, look, man, there's 3 guys around you. It's the NFL. Just go down. You're not going to be able to do it. Well, he just proved me wrong. So it'll probably set you back a little bit, but he's such a dynamic football player. I think when you try to hold Josh Allen back, you're probably doing a disservice. The next couple of years, does Joe Brady maybe know something that we don't know? Listen, I'm sure that inside the building, there's been conversations. He's the interim. I don't know if from a contract perspective, they can even do that right now. I'm sure that they could. I don't know the dynamics of it. But I think even to this point, you take this 8-game sample size, knowing that Joe Brady was thrust into this role, I think he's done enough to run it back next year. I think with an offseason, with his input in trying to craft the offense for next year, free agents, additions in the draft, we know how big of a part of the LSU system he was. I'm sure he still has ties in college football. I'd be more than happy if I'm Terry Pagula and Sean McDermott to hire him to become the full-time offensive coordinator.
Yeah, and, I think Buffalo's hands are tied right now. I think they probably have to adhere to the Rooney Rule in terms of the interview process for offensive coordinator. And but everything he's done in his time since taking over, you have to be encouraged with, because this, for the most part, is not his true offense. He's kind of running the Ken Dorsey system that he inherited, and it's been working really well for Buffalo with the wrinkles he's added in. You give him an entire offseason to build in his own play calls and show what he can do. We've already seen flashes of what he's been able to do for James Cook, for Dalton Kincaid, and this offense. I think that he can elevate them even further when it's a lot of his own play calls in his own system. We know how creative of a mind he is, how much success he had at LSU. Power struggle in Carolina kind of knocked him back in terms of his career arc, because had that not happened, who knows where he would be right now. He could be a hot head coaching candidate, but a bad assignment here, or a bad decision of taking a certain job where he ended up being the scapegoat, it kind of set him back a little bit. But you're right, in Buffalo, this is a good situation, being with one of the most talented quarterbacks in the league. And if the end goal is to become a head coach, you're more likely to get there, and get there pretty quickly when you have Josh Allen and company and you're running that helm.